we're live now from state controlled Britain, and I have with
Wonderful.
me Harry Serpanos. If you've not seen Harry before, I recommend you check out his channel. The thing behind him says "No BS," which is right up my street. If you've got any questions, you can ask some questions. But I've got questions for Harry because he's very underrated in this community. If you don't mind me saying, Harry, you definitely are underrated and underwatched, and your information is, well, I think second to none. You, Bart, Lee Copus, Eddie Goki, I mean, all very consistent. And that's the other thing, you're consistent. And you're also prepared to say stuff that's unfashionable. So, hello.
True.
Yeah.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate the kind words. Physiology doesn't change.
No.
In 15, archaeological data doesn't change. None of that changes. So I think it's just ignorance amongst a number of people, and they just don't get that things are not as complicated as people make them out to be. And they sort of ignore certain genetic adaptations. They sort of ignore certain rare disorders, and people will use N of 1 examples to try and make an argument. You go, well, you're not talking reality here. You just basically say, this is my experience, and how the hell do I know all the things that are involved in your experience, your cheats or non-cheats, your epigenetic changes over a number of generations. There's all these factors. It's impossible. I mean, even in studies are so confounded, let alone anybody's personal life, free living.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've got a great example. I write a daily Substack, and I do research it properly. And I was doing a bit about NAC as a supplement. And I noticed that a lot of the supplements, it says to have with a carbohydrate meal. And I thought, well, I'm going to research why they keep saying that. And it's essentially laziness. Because and literally in the research papers, it's a hang back from 30 years ago, where they thought, oh, you need a lot of insulin for this supplement to work. So even on good makers, supplement bottles, it says take with a carbohydrate meal. No basis on the science whatsoever. I tell you, the main reason I really like your channel is you talk about a couple of things no one else talks about. And you talk about pastoral genes, you touched on it there, and dairy, because dairy divides a lot of people, especially as we've got people talking about fermented dairy, pasteurized raw. I wondered if you could give us a little bit of your knowledge, and I will be sitting here listening as well and learning. Because
the simple sort of stuff, the most arguments that people make is let's just take people now. We'll forget about the gurus for a moment. I'll go on to them. But first, people saying, didn't react properly to me, or I had these feelings, or I really felt lousy, or I felt sluggish, and all these sort of things. But I also can have come across people that have come to me and said, I have lamb and I feel fine, and then I have beef and I feel lousy. And I go, how long have you been? And they usually say, well, I've sort of transitioned. I've been a carnivore for, several months or maybe a year, and it doesn't seem to be working for me. And I usually pin it down to certain things. It's either an environmental factor, like mold or other things in their environment that is actually causing the leaky gut. Or, you can have basically exposure to heavy metals or fumes. You may be close to, let's say, a coal-fired power station that is an old-fashioned one that's polluting quite a bit, and there's particulates, hydrocarbons that can actually cause a number of varied conditions, including raising insulin. That's why I avoid walking on streets with a lot of vehicles passing by. So, for that reason as well. So there's those sort of factors. Then there's a vitamin D. If you're vitamin D deficient or protein deficient, you're not having enough. Maybe you're ill. You had an illness and you need actually more. Maasai have actually worked that out. A lot of tribal people, they give their elderly more protein when they get sick because they realize there's a lot of turnover, a lot of healing that's actually taking place. You need that. That's ancestral knowledge that we sometimes ignore. I have to have a study. Really? These people have worked it out. You need a study?
Yes.
I mean, God help us, with that sort of attitude. And then on the other side, when we've actually those sort of N of one circumstances that are part of why people bring up certain things and certain arguments against dairy, and they don't realize that people can also, if they have poor stomach acid or they have, and leaky gut at the same time, they may not break down sufficiently those proteins into amino acids, and then you've got foreign proteins that get into the bloodstream. And that also can create, even for people that are eating beef, can create a certain level of, antigen type, autoimmunity, or even mild sensitivity. Most of the time, it's usually mild sensitivity than, full-blown autoimmunity because you're on a healthier diet. But if you've got underlying conditions as you're transitioning from an old diet, you're vulnerable to foreign proteins if they're not being digested, especially if you've been on a vegan diet, and you've got, maybe bacterial overgrowth. You may have a whole lot of issues. And then people blame it on dairy or blame it on some animal food that, the sensitivity that they've acquired in recent times for all these sort of personal reasons. That's the sort of the general gist of the personal experience that some people have and arguments that some people throw up in comments and all that. You see it, I see it all the time. Then there's the other side, the gurus. Okay, let's get into them. A lot of the actual gurus are just regurgitating old paleo myths. They're not, they're not real arguments. They're just old paleo myths that they've come up with, these people. So, and it's how they've actually, you have to go all the way back sometimes to the late 19th century and sometimes to the early part of the 20th century to find out that it's, these sort of people, or somebody in their Seventh-day Adventists brought up something about, certain foods. There's just all these things that have been brought up at different times by different people. But when you drill down, they don't really have a lot of strength. There's no real, they can't point you to a study, that's not confounded to buggery. So it's usually, and then I say, well, you've got these Central Asian populations. You've got in Inner Mongolia and further up these people consuming a lot of dairy. You've got people in the Caucasus. You've got people in, some certain traditional places in Africa and Asia that were, big consumers of dairy. They didn't have any problem until the modern era. So what have we done in the modern era? Obviously glyphosate. What's glyphosate? Well, as I've said before, it's registered by Monsanto's as a low-grade antibiotic. So if it's in that food supply, you're actually deranging your gut microbiome. So that could be also an issue due to exposure to glyphosate. So there's all these factors that these gurus are not taking into consideration, and they're just regurgitating a lot of the myths. Like I'll give you an example. There's so much estrogen in milk. Really? In a glass of milk, like a 16-ounce glass, is 6 nanograms of, when you're producing as a woman 630,000 or as a man 53,000. Are you joking? And it's not even estradiol, which is the most active one. It's actually estrone, which menopausal women get. So it's the least problematic and it's minuscule. And then the other one about growth hormones, you probably heard that as well. I mean, the receptor side is different. So it's irrelevant. And all of these things are even broken down in the actual stomach. If you've got acidity, and if you don't have leaky gut, you're not going to actually ingest any of this sort of stuff. So it's just nonsense piled on nonsense that has been perpetrated. And it's the same thing. You don't have leaky gut. You're not going to get any of these, sort of undigested sort of factors or compounds that could create a problem, that gets into circulation and is even A1 as an example. So a lot of that is not looking at the totality of the picture, and it's just focusing on in this reductionist way. And there is, certain vegan researchers or certain paleo researchers that I believe have misrepresent a lot of facts when there are others that are doing similar studies and showing within healthy populations, no issue. And why are these people using a lot of people that are diabetic or all this? Oh, that's right, because most of these people have other health problems. And usually most of them, I haven't come across any diabetic that hasn't leaky gut.
Mm.
So they seem to, and these are sometimes in like case studies that certain doctors will do. And I go, well, that's not a healthy population you're looking at. So there's a lot of that which these people draw on in the paleo community used to, I remember, but well over a decade ago. And it's the same regurgitation of all these sort of myths. In the end, all animal foods break down to simple amino acids, fatty acids, and sugars, whatever the sugars are in there. Anything undigested ends up in the colon and it gets basically digested by the bacteria there, whatever. That's basically it. The rest is nonsense. The rest is underlying other issues that may create these complications. And sometimes you'll even hear me say, avoid this or avoid that for the time being because you may be more sensitive to those things. Because on a vegan diet before or a vegetarian diet before, you may be consuming some of these compounds and now you've got underlying issues. You need to remove all that and stick to the sort of the new stuff, the meat and stuff like that you're going to be less sensitive to because you haven't been exposed with a leaky gut to that. And so you can actually, that's why people tend to say, oh, I feel so much relief. Well, because you're not exposed. Your body's not reacting to it. And as you provide more protein, because your gut is made of collagen, and so the more protein, you're going to basically get more healthy. That plus a number of the other compounds that you're going to get from the meat that are going to provide the healing for the gut itself. And so that then sort of moves away, unless there are other factors, as I said, severe vitamin D deficiencies are one of the big ones, and the other ones are sort of environmental toxins, which we've pretty much covered. That's a sort of general thrust. Most other esoteric stuff out there, because there are some other things, are basically just nobody would believe them. It's just basically the sort of the real deranged, way out there that can believe in those sort of things.
Yeah. Now, Phil's asked a question. And by the way, Nicholas and FX Trader, we'll get to your questions, but I'm trying to sort of modulate the questions into what we're talking about. So Phil is saying, well, how do you know if you have leaky gut? And how do you know if you're healing it?
Well, usually some people may not know. I'll give you an example. You can basically have like a low-grade leaky gut and be unaware of it.
Yep.
But certain foods you'll react really quite a lot to because there's been an underlying sort of immune sensitivity, as I was saying earlier. Also, if people have got really good detox pathways and good immune function, that also can mitigate some of that stuff and it doesn't show as badly. So there's a lot of things that, it's a grey area. And so the difference between one person and another person is going to be quite substantial, where some people will have noticed quite a lot of, histamines, far more histamines, and a lot of other circumstances. Pathology will be obviously. For others, it'll be very, something, it doesn't feel 100%, but I can't really pin it down. So there's a bit of, it's hard to basically for everyone to know. And I mean, we shouldn't become hypochondriacs and basically think that we've all got leaky gut. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that there are a number of people, because of their circumstances, their lifestyle circumstances, that have without knowing it. And there are ways of finding out, and there's a number of tests that Steve knows far more about those tests than me that could actually direct you to them.
Yeah, I think what you're saying there is that intuitive nature of things. So, I mean, Phil, we'll get back to your question in particular, but going broader, I didn't know I was lactose intolerant until I did this job and then realized how I was feeling wasn't correct. So I used to have a cappuccino when I was a high carb person, you know, in my 30s and 40s and pretty fit and doing bodybuilding shows and advanced personal trainer. So the reason I'm saying that, not to be big-headed, but I thought I was very fit and healthy. But every time I had a cappuccino, about half an hour later, I was like, oh, that's sitting a bit heavy. But I just thought that was normal. And then when I stopped having dairy and went to other drinks, I realized that that's problematic. And every time I had a little bit of dairy, I had that problem. I think I've fixed my gut, actually. So to again answer Bill's question there,
Yep.
now I can have a decaf Americano with a bit of cream, and there's no after effects other than I enjoyed the social situation. Yes, you can do tests. I mean, that's definitely, you know, nailed on. You can do so many different tests. You can measure zonulin, for instance, but it's very
That's true.
You know, very nuanced. You can do lactose mannitol testing, which is just, when you look at it online, it's L-M test, and that's the gold standard really for leaky gut, I suppose. There are other ones that you can do, but the best thing is how you feel when you eat something. I think that's it. But yes, you can definitely test for it as well. I want to just change tack, Harry, just a little bit, but it is still on the same point, because this is really hot at the moment. It does cover dairy because kefir is one of those things. How are you? FX Trader has reduced this to: are you for and against, for or against fermented dairy and veggies?
All I'm gonna say is that super credit cycle for this fella is coming to an end. And if you take a look at a lot of the investments, they're all buying short-term bills and coupons. Anyway, I'll just throw that out for that person. Not financial advice. Let me make that clear.
No.
But that's what's happening in the current money markets. Anyway,
Yes.
I'm against. Well, let me put it this way: most people don't realize that when you're in a fasted state, in a healthy person, your acidity levels in your stomach are about 1.7. Now that's in a fasted way, right through.
Yep.
And most bacteria are not going to survive that. Forget it. They're not going to survive 1.7, in that regard. Now, there is a trick. When you eat food exactly right after food, because of the dilution, because it's putting water into the stomach, it's diluting and all that, and that'll drop in more acid. But what your pH can go as high as, especially with dairy, up to 6.7. And there's the trick. And that's why kefir works, because it actually increases the pH. The dairy component has that tendency. And then in the fluid, it doesn't have a lot of resident time in the stomach. And so you end up with more of those beneficial bacteria getting through than being killed off. Normally, the majority, because that's the purpose of the stomach, is to basically sterilize everything. But when you're talking about reuteri, which is of promoted reuteri and rhamnosus, those two in particular have really good acid
Buffering.
capacity to survive, to buffer, to survive acid. So that's why if I'm going to promote any sort of fermented food, it would be basically kefir. Most of the others, the plant-based ones and all that, practically very little gets through. A bit does get through, survives, but very little. So you're and that's just because you're adding, compared to food, you're adding a massive amount in comparison to food, and that's why just a few get through because of the differential in the stomach, the fluids, the slightly differential of the actual acid levels in the lower parts as you're getting closer to the bottom sphincter, because that the body creates these bufferings deliberately, has to, because it's just about to go into, you can't go as battery acid straight into the actual small intestine, and that's the reason why. And then it gets further buffered and with alkalizing, like when you get bile acids and stuff like that. But in the stomach, there's that sweet spot, and also dairy, like cheeses and all these things. The bacterial strains, because they're acid loving, the lactobacillus and all that, they tend to survive in greater numbers. But they also get annihilated to a large extent, probably 70 to 80%. But a proportion of them do survive and get through. But remember also that the small intestine gets cleansed completely by the bile acids. So the small intestine. So it's a small amount that will actually end up in your colon. I mean, the best way to basically introduce probiotics is through the anus, like your mum did with the pills.
Yes.
Not by the mouth.
Yes.
I'll be selling you. I'll have to be selling a new supplement. Poo supplement.
No, I don't.
Poo supplement.
We can stick those anyway, right?
Yeah.
Just to, I don't know if he's asking you or both of us, but my last Substack was called "Fermented Foods: The Great Ancestral Microbiome Swindle." So that might tell you where I am. It's actually obviously a bit clickbaity, but I find it really frustrating when people use the wrong reasons, not necessarily the wrong suggestion, but the reasoning is wrong. So, for instance, someone saying, I'm drinking just the brine from my fermented veg because I want the same bacteria that our hunter-gatherers used to get from having their hands in the soil, and not being sanitized. Well, they're completely different things.
True.
You are not doing that. I mean, that's a romantic view of what you're doing. In fact, you would be better to actually do some gardening and not wash your hands, in your soil that is natural soil that hasn't got glyphosate and everything. Yes,
it's just nonsense. And people need to understand that it is nonsense. I mean, what's your appendix? I mean, I've said this in live streams plenty of times. You've probably heard me. It's basically a repository of your gut microbiome. So you think you can't repopulate it? And I've actually said this in the vegan myths and falsehoods of veganism, my video playlist series, and I cover this in one of them, and I actually show how certain types of bacterial strains increase with plants, and certain ones like bifido and lactobacillus increase with animal foods.
Mm-hmm.
So the animal foods themselves provide the aminos that basically help those beneficial bacteria, the bifido, which is the key, and the lactose, bacillus, to actually grow and increase in our microbiome, so to speak. So, and out of the firmicutes, the prevotella to reduce. And prevotella, we know that it increases interleukins, a number of inflammatory interleukins. So it's well established. Even though the vegans will say, how great prevotella is, that's just some vegan crackpots, doctors, I don't really academics, doctors are actually arguing that, it's been misunderstood. No, it hasn't. Academics have done studies in animal models and in humans and have shown quite clear when you have a high dose of prevotella, there is a number of these interleukins go up. That's reality. Now, you can argue whatever you like, but that's reality. And we know that, when bifido goes down and lactobacillus goes down, a lot of gut issues increase. In the only foods that actually increase it and provide are the animal foods. The plant foods tend to increase the firmicutes like prevotella.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the nuance is always lost, and like you say, there's a lot of historical misinformation that they hang on to. I mean, I'm very basic. Well, actually, I'll tell you, you might not know this, Harry, but I recently did a advanced gut microbiome test. And
Okay.
now I'm using terminology that I don't necessarily agree with, by the way, but I will
Yep.
tell you what they said. So beneficial bacteria, as to quote Bart and Eddie, according to who on the basis of what, but let's go with it. Beneficial bacteria, fantastic, ideal, best score you could get. It's amazing. You get a big green tick for all that. And then we've got the bad bacteria again. Who knows? But anyway, no bad bacteria.
Can I
So
ask you something
yeah, of course.
before you finish? I know
Yeah,
because I've heard this, and you've mentioned it before. I think on Bart's.
yeah.
Let me ask you: how many different bacterial families exist in our systems? 43,000.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and there's about, in terms of strains from all those, I think it's well over 600. I think somebody said that it's about 650 or 680. Not clear exactly. It could be higher. Some
Hmm.
people say it could be over 1,000,000.
Yep.
The different strains. The official line, it's somewhere between 600 to 700. The official line, but it could be higher. Some other people argue. How many have been well studied to this day? Take a wild guess.
3, maybe. I don't know.
10.
10.
That's it.
Yeah. Yes.
That is it. E. coli being one of the ones that have been studied the most, 300,000 times,
Mm.
cited in different research
Yes.
studies,
Yes.
sort of
Yeah.
literature.
So we are
Basically,
talking
we know bugger all.
exactly, which is the point I'm making. But also, I want to get to the score they gave my diet. So with that in mind, I had an ideal good bacteria, an absolutely ideal bad bacteria, and a fantastic diversity and all that, allegedly. My diet was scored 0 out of 5. Now that's impossible. That's impossible. So that's not a clinical judgment. That's an algorithm. It's carnivore. There's
Exactly.
no fiber.
Precisely.
So I wrote to the lab because I am connected to the labs after doing so much in
Yeah.
involvement with them. I'm still waiting for my reply where I said that is physically impossible for you to give me a 0 because you've told me my gut bacteria is fantastic, my diversity is fantastic. It can't be 0 just from common sense. I must be doing something right, which I haven't got an answer to, because this is the problem. People get this information, it looks really official, and they're not going to do that critical thinking.
Yeah, but
They're just going to say,
do you,
"Oh, right."
what do the studies actually show when you're actually eating a high plant-based diet? Which metabolites do you have more in terms of short-chain fatty acids? Acetate.
Mhm.
So pretty much, where if you're the bugs that you've got are using proteins, they're going to be producing isobutyrate. These sort of less
Mhm.
acetate, and like acetate can actually also go back to and to the liver and also be reprocessed as glucose.
Mhm.
So it can actually, from fiber, you can actually create, that additional, especially if you're in if you've got slightly elevated insulin, the body's trying to find it, can't access due to hormone sensitive lipase, can't access enough fat. So it's going, I need something. So it starts converting things because the body's a Swiss Army knife. It'll convert anything when it desperately needs things. So
Yes.
you would under that sort of diet, you will actually reduce the amount of short chain fatty acid or the
Mm.
butyrate and all that sort of stuff. People don't take this into consideration at all.
Mm.
Where isobutyrate and many of these other things, you don't get that issue. So even the type of short chain fatty acids that are produced from aminos and fat are completely different.
Yes. I mean, I won't get into the next bit because people have heard it too much from me about
Yep.
short chain fatty acids, and the people
Yep.
that promote fiber also say we shouldn't have saturated fat. Short chain fatty acid is a saturated fat. But I'm going to get back to this. I want to pivot a little bit on this question, you see.
Yep. Go
So
right ahead.
So I live in the real world. So if people are taking fermented dairy or fermented veg, or they're drinking the brine from the fermented veg and not having the, all of that, whatever, if you're feeling better, I'm not denying your experience. But why are you feeling better? Is it that, or is it some other reason? Or is it just placebo? I don't really mind. If you're feeling better, we're not having a go at you. We're just talking it
No, no.
through, so fair enough. But I want to talk to you about your take on pastoral genes. You talk about that a lot, and your own calcium genetics,
Yep.
because I think that's really fascinating, because dairy isn't just about, and firstly, Harry, actually, I want to say thank you for talking about environmental stuff, because that blaming the diet is what people do. A bit like my deafness. If I can't hear someone, the first thing I think is it's me. It's my hearing.
Yep.
And then I'll talk to someone else and they go, oh no, they're really difficult to hear. They're really quiet, or they've got a terrible accent. I don't know what they're saying. So we've gone on carnivore. We've got a problem. Oh, it's the diet. Well, hang on a minute. It could be all those other environmental factors you say, like pollution and all that. But you also talk about, like I say, the pastoral genes and your own genetics with calcium. Could you just pop in to the chat a little
Yeah,
bit
yeah,
about that?
I can. I'll just say one thing about a situation with one subscriber. This was last year, I can't,
Mm-hmm.
and came out with, I'm feeling crappy at this stage. And I go, we went through all, I went through asking all these questions. I was just getting a bit frustrated. And then I actually asked the person, have you changed residency or changed jobs recently? Oh, yeah. And I said, did it coincide with what's happening to you? Yeah, it actually ended up being mold.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So that was one thing. And then they, I don't know how they dealt, they never got back to me. They just told me what it was when they found out, but they never came back to tell me. A lot of people, when they resolve things, they forget you. They walk away. So you never get feedback. Some people, I usually ask them, can you please come back and tell me? Some people do, not everyone. So it's a bit of, anyway, personalities. Now, getting back to the genetics. It's not only me. When I went paleo, I used to get slight arrhythmias from getting sort of a ending up with, because it has to do with I'll just explain one thing. If a healthy person that doesn't have these genetics ends up, for whatever reason, getting an underlying, under eating, like bulimia or whatever, getting an underlying calcium deficiency, what happens is the body can actually pull from the bone as
Mm-hmm.
well to
Yep.
basically buffer sort of that. The problem with these genetics is that you're getting certain amount from the diet, person that doesn't have these genetics, and then buffering a bit with that. There's only a certain rate that you can actually buffer from the bones. You still need to get a certain rate from the actual digestion. And so eventually you can get to a stage where you start getting certain strange arrhythmias or heart rates and stuff like that. Even people that don't have these genetics, but it usually takes longer for them. Where people with our genetics, with my genetics in particular, get there faster. So within a short amount of time, less than 3 months or 3 or 4 months on paleo, this is talking about quite a few years ago. What is it now, 13 years or something like that. I ended up getting arrhythmias within that period of time. So, and that was scary, I can tell you, Steve. That was really
Mm.
damn scary. And I couldn't work out. I said, I'm doing the perfect diet. What the hell's going on here?
Mm.
Well, it wasn't in hindsight, but at the time, that's what I believed. And so, I believed there were all these gurus that dairy's not necessary, it's for babies and all this sort of other stuff. And, the arguments just kept on piling up. And so I started doing a bit of a deep dive, trying to work out what the hell's going on, because it didn't make sense. And then I sort of came across certain articles showing that calcium can actually create these symptoms. And I go, okay, if it's calcium, then aren't I getting enough I'm supposed to be getting enough from the food. Other people do it and don't have these symptoms. Why aren't I? And then it sort of dawned on me. I was actually, I think, on the toilet. I think. Anyway, it dawned on me that basically maybe it's genetic.
Mm-hmm.
And then I sort of, started looking into it, and came across some of the genes and stuff like that. Then I forgot about it completely. I went low carb, got on dairy, I was fine. That all went away, and just I put it behind, forgot all about it. And then before I started my channel, several years before, I did a genetic test, and then I went and looked at the SNPs, and I go, oh, I really do have genetics that have create poor absorption of calcium, and I'd eat more to overcome that. Damn, I wish I knew. So earlier, because I had, injured myself and sort of fractures and, things like that. And I didn't realize why things weren't healing properly and why I was getting these sort of things, these sort of injuries. And I'm going, and then eventually once I looked at those genetic tests, then it just, damn. So there are people, and then I realized that 24% of the population in the Eurasia sort of region. You go, okay, I really need dairy. So, and even though had all that paleo propaganda in my head about how dangerous dairy was and all this sort of stuff, I go, oh, I got them. I just went low carb, went dairy, and felt a hell of a lot better, I can tell you. The arrhythmias went away completely. Certain, my heart rate went back to normal, down to the 60 to 65 or whatever sort of rate, because I was exercising as well. It was sometimes dropping down to the low 59, 58. Due to exercise, you end up, improving your heart sort of rate. But it was a shocker to the system to realize that not only me, but many other people were completely unaware of genetics in areas like methylation, in areas like calcium, in areas like, probably with vitamin A, people were a bit more aware of that, even in the paleo community, but not to the degree that it was in different populations. They sort of had this, oh yeah, there's a bit of conversion, but it's not a big thing. Well, actually, in some populations it is, like the Irish and a few others, like people in the British Isles. It's a hell of a lot, but you require more retinol rather than beta carotene. So you're very poor converters. I'm a 32%, but some people can be even higher than that, depending on the different gene pathway that affect certain pathways. So, yeah, once I started realizing that how important in the last 10,000 years, 12,000 years, depending on which part of the planet you're on, of agriculture and pastoralism and how that's affected our ability to cope with certain things like salicylates, for instance. Mediterranean people don't have a sensitivity. Northern Europeans in far more numbers do. So coconut ain't for you, but people in the south can cope with that, and in the tropics and other places. So once you realize these sort of adaptations over this period of time, not that we're saying these foods are optimal, but you can actually tolerate them better than somebody as an Inuit or Australian Aboriginal that will actually get far worse effects because for them, these are completely alien to their genetics.
So is this the lactase persistence mutation that you're talking about, or is it something a bit more?
No, that's a different. The lactase persistency is I've got that, but they people can have lactase persistency and not have these calcium absorption genes. Okay. So that's not necessary, because I believe that certain populations, for whatever reason, must have been forced to consume more dairy because they didn't have much of an option.
Yes.
For whatever reason. And that created a genetic, that created an adaptive pressure to force such a genetic change. in
Mm.
those people. And so a proportion of people have ended up with that. And if you look at the level, a quarter of the population, plus or minus, have osteoporosis in Northern Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And the percentage coincides with those genetics, calcium absorption. And if you look at
Right.
the sad diet that the majority of people are on, they aren't getting a lot. And what they're getting is not really calcium. It's sort of dairy. It's sort of what is it? Make believe dairy that they put in different processed foods.
Yes. So what is the term for your calcium malabsorption genetics then?
Off the top of my head, I can't remember the exact
Oh, right.
SNPs.
Okay. Okay.
But I do have a video. If you Google my name and calcium genes,
Mm-hmm.
it comes up and it'll actually tell you exactly the SNPs. But off the top of my head, the RS whatever, I can't remember all of them.
Okay.
So
Well, I'm trying to get people to your channel, you see, and I'm playing devil's advocate here. So,
fair enough.
yeah, that's very good. And that's the thing. I think dairy also, you touched on A1 and A2, and also there's a difference between pasteurized and raw. 'Cause someone said I'm forgetting all the nuance in the different types of dairy. Hey, yeah, absolutely. But
Well, let me just
talking
say
to
something on that.
yes,
What are you absorbing? You're not absorbing proteins unless you've got leaky gut. You're
mm,
absorbing amino acids and fatty acids and simple sugars. Everything in the stomach gets denatured.
yes,
That's what that
that's it.
acid,
Yeah,
that
that's what
stomach
it
acid is
does.
all for, to denature everything and break things down to simple molecules,
Mm,
food molecules, and then to be absorbed. We don't
mm,
absorb foreign things. That creates, if you absorb too much, or can sensitivity or autoimmunity. That's all. The body's not stupid. What do you think
no,
inflammasome, activates each time you eat? Because it's in the part of your immune system. One of the major parts are in there. And the molecule, my favorite molecule, taurine, is the one that regulates inflammasome with vitamin D. Plus, the other thing is it suppresses spermidine, so bacterial overgrowth, any overgrowth basically of microorganisms, and that use spermidine. That should be in your ball sack, not in your gut, being pushed through. And the thing is, it lowers histamine as well.
mm,
So what do we criticize people in the low carb community that talk about, oh, I'm getting all these histamine issues, I can't resolve it and all that? And I go, why aren't you eating more meat?
mm,
That's how you're going to get, and even freshly slaughtered, you're going to get more taurine. Why aren't you eating more meat to regulate that system?
mm. And then we get to the undereating thing. People are undereating, which is
Pretty
the same.
much.
The different
Yep.
side of the same coin, really.
Yeah, because you need for healing, you need more protein. As I said, those Maasai
Yes.
knew it. You
Mm,
need more protein because you're using a certain proportion for protein synthesis, a certain it's 32% from meat. Then you're using a whole lot of other stuff to, produce peptides, enzymes, all these things, these wonderful little, transporters that are involved in all sorts of activities in the body, moving stuff around. All these things are required, or things to bind things like iron or whatever. All these things need to be transcripted, need to be created inside the cell to be provided to the body to be able to do all these functions. So we need extra protein. So when we're healing and we're turning over and clearing out stuff, that requires resources.
mm. Well, I mean, I know this is a real left field analogy, but medications, they test dosage and they will, so you're having the thing and nothing's happening. So they increase the dose until they find the sweet spot. So
Exactly.
it's exactly the same thing. Right. Anyway, I'm going to get to some questions. Sorry, Harry.
Perfect analogy.
Well, yeah, thank you very much. Nicholas here is asking, let's put it on the screen. Sorry, Nicholas, for the long wait, but as Jonathan Carnival Muscle said, if Harry's on, you need lots of hours. I haven't got lots of hours this morning, but we'll hopefully do this again. Anyway, regarding some traditional plant foods which oxalates, we often read that the calcium in these foods, included as dairy usually, protects them from oxalates. Do we really know if this is true at all?
Partially.
Yeah.
Some oxalate will be bound if you combine. I mean, traditional populations used to soak a lot of these carbohydrates that had high oxalates and dump all the water to get rid of the oxalates and a whole lot of other anti-nutrients. And that's how they used to then prepare. And then they would combine a lot of that in, like, in Greece, you have a lot of like pies, like either zucchini pies, or which zucchini doesn't have a lot, but spinach pies and pumpkin pies. And they will combine them with a lot of dairy. And that sort of mitigates some of that sort of stuff. We can cope with about 50 milligrams of oxalate in the diet, but the best thing is just to keep it out of the diet.
Yes. Yes, and I think that's
Generally
the
speaking.
thing. Yeah, good. That's such a good question. Right, we're going to get to the next one.
I just want to say one thing. Tell me,
go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say one thing to Nick. Tell me one value of actually eating these foods. Beyond that, I used to eat them when I grew up and I like their taste or texture or got used to it. Beyond that, what's the nutritional value? It's quite poor when you look at protease inhibitors and everything else that are involved, the anti-nutrients. And in the end, you're not going to get as much. And even when you do the soaking and all that, you start losing a lot of micronutrients in that process of getting rid of some of the anti-nutrients. So in the end, and considering the poor soils, what are you ending up getting? A bit of glyphosate, which is going to derange your microbiome? How smart is that? Give it a miss. Concentrate
give
on
it a
animal
miss.
foods.
So simple, really, isn't it?
Yep.
This is a nice question. Coles Supermarket is selling Superfry 100% Australian beef tallow. Do you think that this is a good fat to eat with leaner cuts of meat?
Look, I don't know enough about. I usually get tallow from Tassie tallow down here in Tasmania, and I know that it's actually sourced from grass-fed, grass-finished, all this sort of stuff, animals. So I can trust that.
Yes.
But as far as where Coles is actually one of the big supermarket chains in Australia, it's Woolies, Woolworths. We'll call it Woolies as a sort of a nickname, and Coles. They're the two big chains in Australia. Now, I have no idea where they're sourcing theirs. I would have to basically investigate it to be able to tell you. So there are a number of sites. I have pinned a specific site in my, I think it was a few days ago, and that's in my community posts. And it actually has a link to a website that actually covers a lot of these things like injectable stuff into animals, certain food additives, and a number of other nefarious things that shouldn't go into the food supply of animal foods, and different businesses that don't include those things. So that's a good site to get information to be able to source better quality animal foods if you're really interested.
Yeah, I think just to broaden it out, I wouldn't. You're right to talk about the particular supermarket because the supply and processing is really important. But tallow in general, yes, is an excellent fat to add. If we just talk about tallow, yeah. Jonathan's done some homework, by the way, and there's the calcium sensing receptors and the SNPs that we talked about. Jonathan, you're an absolute star, and I will try and cut and paste that, and so I can put it in the description for people that are interested in getting that testing. Or even better, go to Harry's channel and watch the video, which is what we're trying to do here. Get a few more people to Harry's channel because it is really good. I'm telling you. And when you're looking, someone's put, is butter a better option? It's a different option. because you've got butter. Well, they've both got fat soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K. And, butter will have lots of A and K too. It's not really a competition. Don't
No,
get
it's not.
butter is, sorry, go on.
Animal
Go on,
foods,
Harry.
I use animal fats based on taste. So, for instance, if I take a roast and I want to lard it, I drill in, cut in with knives, and actually fill it up with lard. I have lard that I get from Western Australia, which is organic, grass fed, all this sort of stuff, which is foraging, free foraging animal, and I'll get that sort of stuff. And that is really nice in the roast. It actually just softens, absolutely a nice taste. And then there are other foods like, I don't like using tallow or using lard or stuff like that when I'm doing certain seafoods like crustaceans and stuff like that. I prefer the buttery. So I'll use butter, or I'll use, in certain ones, I may use occasionally like duck fat, which a lot of the French cooks use. So stuff like that. There are myriad of animal fats that you can use depending on the foods and all that. You can experiment and see whether your taste buds, and that also makes the, rather than actually having just a plain old steak every day, you can actually make your diet a bit richer. Remember, a lot of the crustaceans and all that have higher micronutrient content than other animal foods like ruminant animals. Now, we should prioritize ruminant animals, but remember the N15 data that I've actually talked about in the past? Every single population on this planet always had a proportion anywhere between a quarter, excluding the Inuit, which can be as high as 75%, but a quarter, and they have genetics that they can cope with these high levels of omega-3s. They have about a quarter to as low as about 5% of coastal or river seafood of varied types. So I think that it's a good idea to get those extra micronutrients. A lot of the crustaceans tend to have more minerals, where things like fish and other things like that tend to have other micronutrients, and you'll get a bit, even the fatty acid composition, you get some of those sort of things, especially in an environment that we live now where we're polluted with blue light, and omega-3s help with that because we lose far more in the retina. So there's that side of things as well. We need to consider modern lifestyle with our choices. So there's all these sort of elements to take into consideration. But on top of that, also enjoying carnivore food. So it's sort of a more wider variety of foods.
Yes. Cool. Let's go to the next question. Great answers. I bet people are surprised that I'm keeping you nice and tight on the answers. Micah, who's a fantastic follower, thank you very much again for tuning in. Oh, that's for everybody actually is tuning in. So is OMAD with carnivore the best long-term solution regarding weight and health? I'm just going to poke my nose in before Harry answers.
Okay.
There's no one size fits all. For some people, I mean, I coach a lot of people, Harry coaches people. Some people really thrive on OMAD, so I'm not going to take that experience away from them. Some people think they're thriving on OMAD, and I think they might do better with 2 meals a day, and they try it, and they do. Are you getting enough protein in? Some people struggle with OMAD to get enough protein in. I think if you look at your insulin response, if you look at the physiology, if you can cope on OMAD and you get all the protein in that you want and it socially fits in with your lifestyle, it does seem to be one of the most effective ways of managing your way of eating. But, for me, I'm too mad. That works for me because of a social situation. I like to eat, dinner with my wife in the evening or in between times when she's going out to do her Pilates and I've got a gap in my day. So I think it's difficult to say, yes, this one thing works for everybody, but it's certainly a thing to consider. But anyway, yes, Harry, your thoughts.
I was going to say, look, if we look at ancestral, just purely ancestral, we do notice that most populations have one meal a day.
Yeah.
You know, that's the reality. They wake up, they get the dawn effect, they get some free fatty acids, some glucose into their bloodstream, and they grab their spear and they head out to try and find an animal to kill. Okay, so that's ancestrally. They find something, they kill it. They may eat a bit of the organ meat sometimes, and share it amongst themselves and take the rest back. But generally speaking, most of them will head back and have one big meal, and they'll have it over a length of time. They won't, they're not going to sit there and just, they'll cut things while it's still sort of on under the sort of reducing coal of the wood that they've used. And they'll just cut pieces and they'll just keep on eating for some time. And that's how they do it. And they'll talk stories and things like that. Our lifestyle is different. And it's really hard to basically do that slow digestion, for a long period of time. And I find it even myself, I do 2 meals a day because it sort of fits my lifestyle. But I try and prioritize one meal to have a bit more protein compared to the other meal for that insulin bump that I need every day to just keep the kidneys on side with the electrolytes. So I don't take any electrolytes, never have. Well, let me rephrase it. Never have within the carnivore period, but before, when I was low, keto and all that and low carb, definitely I was constantly, because I dump a lot of sodium. And so I'm one of those dumpers where other people retain more. It's, different genetics. And so for me, it was game changer for me was both taurine and pumping and pushing up my my intake in one of my meals of protein to get that just extra insulin effect that basically fixed that problem for me. If you can tolerate one meal, fine, go right ahead, knock yourself out. If you're like self-employed, I find sometimes when I'm working from home, I'll do just one meal, but I can because I'll just sit there and work and just eat slowly. And I can, before I realize I've gone, oh, did I eat all that? So,
Yeah.
but if you're basically in a work environment and stuff like that, when I'm in the office the other 3 days of the week, not going to work,
No.
So it's not a good image. You have to work within the constraints of your life in a sense and family as well.
Right. Couple of quick questions to finish then. Serious question for Jonathan. Thoughts on psilocybin, which is the compound in magic mushrooms for people, as you can see in the little graphic there, for neuro resetting and pain relief. I mean, this is something I definitely did in part of my honours degree from physiology and health sciences, and it definitely seems to desynchronize the brain network and then allow for neuroplasticity, and does seem to modulate pain. But Harry, have you got any thoughts on that?
Look, as far as a lot of people have, there have been cases where some people have had the opposite effect, have had some side effects and stuff like that. There's probably a genetic base for it. I can't pin it down because there's not really much research into these sort of things. And most of the research that's done is people that are pushing it more than anything else. And so I can't definitively say, yes, it is or not. Have our ancestors in some parts of the world use some of these herbal remedies and stuff like that? They have, but not all populations. Are they necessary? Maybe not. For a healthy person, definitely not. But for people that may have certain issues, maybe could be useful depending on your genetics and how you feel and how you respond to it. It's one of those things I can't give you a black and white answer on that sort of thing. It's a bit of a gray area due to genetics.
Yeah, brilliant. That's a good answer, which is a beautiful segue to genetics. It's almost like it was a script. These aren't scripted, by the way. These are people genuinely putting questions. It just
You've been
works out.
colluding behind my back, Stephen.
Yeah. Now, yesterday I worked over the Christmas period because I have some people that need a lot of, guidance and genetics. I blow hot and cold on genetics, but this person has an identical twin and they share many problems. But diet, and Bart would love this, you'd love this as well, Harry, thinking about it. It's almost like a randomized control trial because they are identical twins. They have some similarities, some issues that are problematic, but the one I was speaking to was doing all these environmental and nutritional differences, and his health is considerably different to his identical twin who was doing none of these things. And I'll just give you a little glimpse into his situation. He actually had triglycerides at 900 milligrams per deciliter and
Okay.
uncontrollable high levels of cholesterol, and which I'm not saying is good or bad. I'm just giving you some idea. His HbA1c, which I know is an unreliable marker, but it still shows you a trend, was, in the 13s, 14s, where it's now 5. So his diet in 2 years has made a substantial difference. But there are still some things that aren't resolving, which his identical twin has. So here's the question. Are those genetics particular to a family member? If one person has it, is it likely that the others do? I just wanted to say, from my experience, yes. But what do you think?
Look, it depends.
Yeah.
Certain genetic conditions require from both family members, like thalassemia and a few other things, and others don't. Just having, so it's a complex tapestry in that regard when it comes, and there are a number of, like with calcium, there's not, while those are some of the main genes that I talk about, and Jonathan also brought up as well, there are a whole lot of other secondary ones which are associated, but there hasn't been enough research, so we're not really clear about them, how important they are between different populations and all that, because there are variations. And the same thing, so if you're seeing genetic things, because usually certain genetic things become established over a number of generations.
Mm-hmm.
And so those sort of genetic conditions, I usually find, especially the rare ones, they're always related to cofactors, and 3 key cofactors: thiamine, riboflavin, mostly riboflavin, and a niacin. These are the 3 ones because they're all involved in energy with your mitochondria, with energy production. These ones tend to be the ones that seem to be implicated in a lot of these rare conditions more than anything else, with riboflavin being right at the top. As an example, I've had about 3 subscribers that have got the rare condition of fish odor syndrome, which means that, the conversion of TMA to TMAO can't be done properly. And these people tend to have an issue with their skin sort of having a bit of a fishy smell, so to speak. Well, riboflavin corrects that completely. No. And so these people they don't want to eat a lot of dairy, because probably their answer, to get the riboflavin, because dairy is one of the best sources. But they pretty much take a supplement, it's fixed the problem completely. It's gone for them. And so, and luckily 2 of them did provide me feedback, the other one didn't. But anyway, kind of perfection with subs. But MTHFR, I did a video probably about 5 years ago, or getting close to that, or a bit over, can't remember exactly. It's a while ago. And it was called Methylation Part 1. It's one of my earliest videos. And it covers basically MTHFR. That is the enzyme. Again, it's a riboflavin dependent enzyme. Eat dairy, and your homocysteine comes down, and that enzyme works properly. You don't need folate. Because folate, if
Mm.
you actually put excess folate, like a lot of naturopaths put in, you end up creating imbalances with or deficiencies in B12, not the solution. So
Mm.
it's a riboflavin because it has to do with energy in the
Yes.
system, certain key nutrients that we need. Now,
Mm.
I've speculated that some of these may be related to some of these pastoral adaptations. That's a speculation on me. I've got no proof, no research. It's just something that I've come out of extrapolating. I'm finding that a lot of people that tend to have some of the calcium genes also tend to have some of these, like MTHFR and many others, far more than the general public. And so it's an extrapolation without proof, but there's a lot of association in that regard. So that's one thing that why I say that genetics does play an important role, and these changes that have happened in the last 12,000 years can't be ignored. And they have in a
Mm.
lot of communities because
Yeah.
gurus just don't want to deal with it. That's really what
No.
it is. You can't sell product. You can't do this. It's too much of a hassle to deal with. I don't want to know. And yeah, it is what it is.
Brilliant. Now, Nicholas, thank you very much for the €5. Thank you for a wonderful discussion, gentlemen. This is going to be my last question because I have to be off at 10 past. Because if anyone knows, I've got to go to the vet with my wonderful dog Rupert, who's having his injury looked at. I don't know if Harry knows about that. So just a very quick last question. If we haven't got to your question, do apologise. And I'm going to beg and plead with Harry to come back on. So we will get him back on, I think. So, Harry, can you just talk briefly on the omega-6 from animal fat, reductionist carnivores still keeping up the PUFA phobia?
Well, I'll give you an example. Just one.
Yep.
Skin. If you've got a deficiency in omega-6, you're going to have problems with your skin. That's one big one. A lot of dermatitis issues are related to a deficiency in omega-6 in specifically. There's a bit of retinol there and a few other nutrients as well. And also what are the key keratin aminos? It's cysteine, alanine, and leucine. CAL. Those are the key, and then you've got the sort of sulfurs that you got a peptide binding, and then the sulfur binding that basically makes that keratin sort of that tied together. But those are the sort of things. So if you're not eating enough, for instance, animal foods, you're not going to get enough to have thicker skin and better protection as well. If that sort of the dead cells, you're going to have less layers, as an example, at the top. So there's that sort of stuff. So we need to stop fearing, these sort of. I've got a whole playlist on omega-6 on PUFA, and I cover a lot of this. When you cook it up to 3 hours, you get trace amounts of oxidants, trace amounts. Olive oil, you'll get substantial, even in the bottle, before you even cook it. Seed oils, forget it. It's off the charts,
Yep.
In the food matrix, somehow that doesn't happen. We don't know how because it hasn't been researched, but it doesn't happen. When they cook it up to 3 hours, I don't think anybody sits around cooking their pork for 3 hours. They just don't. I wouldn't, because it's going to end up so dry you can't eat it. It's rubbery. So, so you've got that, and in order to get any oxidants, I'm giving away so much, but do go and watch those videos. There's research showing quite clearly the amounts. After I think it was 32 hours before they were able to get anything higher, and then even then it was still lower than the seed oils and olive oil. So what else do you need as proof that basically animal omega-6 is not a problem, and it also has a lot of benefits.
Absolutely. Right.
Remember,
Harry,
bodybuilders use arachidonic acid to basically for healing.
Yes.
So I'll leave it at there. Thank you.
Yeah. Right. So hopefully we'll get you back on. And I want to thank everyone for watching on YouTube. Um, I'm assuming from Harry's face he doesn't know what happened to my dog about 2 weeks ago.
No,
He was viciously attacked and was under surgery. We thought he'd lost his leg, but he hasn't lost his leg, but
oh,
he's
shit.
lost a bit of his toe. Yeah, it's horrible. So we're off to the vets in a minute, but I hope you had a nice Christmas, Harry. And I'm
I
going to
did.
wish you a happy new year. Will we see you in the new year? Will I be able to get back on?
Yeah, definitely. Just contact me. It's easier when somebody else does it because I don't have to do all the effort, all the work in that
Okay,
regard. I just post it after it's released on my community post, and it saves me having to do a live stream in a sense.
brilliant.
So, because
Okay, and
tomorrow, as I said earlier, I'll be at Dad's place, and I've got a few things to do. So, having lunch with
okay,
him as
mate.
well. Yep,
Well, I'll see you next year. And in the
definitely.
description to this live stream, the first link is to Harry's YouTube channel, so you'll be able to find him there. And to everyone on YouTube, thank you very much. And if I don't
Thanks,
see you before, have a happy new year.
and from me as well.
Yes.